It is 7 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the special Board of Selectmen meeting with the Board of Finance for January 13th, 2021. Looks as if in attendance is myself, Mike Ergo, First Selectman, Nita Kincaid, Select Woman, Bob Carlson, Selectman. From the Board of Finance, I believe we have Dan Spring, Paul Simons, Sarah Nelson, Brett Mastriani, Ann Aiken, and Carolyn Howell. I'd like to thank all the members for taking some extra time to have this special meeting and wish everybody a happy new year. And thank you to those who have taken the time to attend from the public as well. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the utilities and maintenance at 298 Norwich Westerly Road. I'll give a little bit of a background. I know the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen were provided with some documentation to detail those expenses. And then we can just have some general discussion as to how to kind of move forward. So as we all remember, it's no secret or surprise that the Board of Education building, or as it was, the old middle high school, has been kind of turned into what we're calling the North Stonington Education Center. Once the building, the new schools were built, we knew we were going to have a vacant building there. I think initially we originally had thought maybe we'd be able to demo the middle school wing of that through the process of lack of funding, as well as a vote that passed about 2-1. There was the interest in trying to lease out the building, the middle school portion of the building. We always would have had the what we're considering to be the central office space in the building and the 2-story part of the building to worry about. So there will always be expenses associated with the building, regardless of whether the middle school wing was there or not. But with the middle school vote, it kind of gave us the go ahead to try to lease the space out, and that was September 14th when that vote passed. Subsequently, we tried last year. We all went through the budget process. We had initially tried and thought we would budget around $40,000 at least to put towards utilities and maintenance for the building, knowing that there would be costs associated with having the building. That was cut from the budget in the process of budgeting. So all that we only had a small amount of money to use for maintenance on the building. So it really isn't any surprise that we are over budget on what the utilities and maintenance are for that facility right now. As I said, you were provided with some estimates that we have as to what we think the facilities are going to probably cost us for this year. We also had anticipated having some revenue coming into the building. Things definitely took a lot longer than we anticipated as far as trying to get it rented out. We ran into some obstacles with having a couple of people who had interest organizations, and now we're down to no real solid negotiations on the building. So, just to catch up, if you didn't pay attention, if you didn't see last night's Board of Selectmen meeting, I mentioned the other tenant who had indicated interest. Lighthouse has decided they are not going to pursue tenancy in the building. I'll also mention I did have a walkthrough yesterday with a consortium representative who was actually very, very interested, very intrigued, and saw the opportunity there. So I would say that there is some great opportunity with the facility. I think it's our mission right now to try to rent it out based on what the voters asked us to do. I think that $40,000 number that we were talking about budgeting last year probably wouldn't have been a bad number if we had the revenue we thought we might have with the tenancy that we were entertaining at the time. Since that September timeframe, we had one tenant pull out, and then the other one has pulled out, unfortunately, as well. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we're going to have some revenue coming in if we all work together on trying to promote this building getting rented out. And I think that's really the most important thing that I want to emphasize is that I really want to try to work hard over the next 6 to 8 months to try to get tenants in this building. And I hope we can all work together on that. In the event that we don't get tenants in the building, I think then we have to say, okay, what are we doing here? And I think all options should be discussed at that time ranging from potential demolition to actually sale of the building. Because that seems to actually make the most sense in my mind if we're not able to rent it out versus having the town have to pay for a demolition. Potential sale could be something to discuss. So that's a lot of information to kind of absorb. Really, I think just to talk about how I envision this moving forward. I had mentioned back on a meeting on November 24th, pretty specifically to my board, that we were exceeding the expenses that we had budgeted for this, and that that was the situation we were in. Per statute, we can exceed lines. We just can't exceed department budgets. So there's no legal problem with anything that's happened here or anything like that. It's just a budgetary situation. So my plan had been all along to come to the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen as we got closer to the spring, once we kind of had a sense of what the numbers were going to be. So that way we could go for an additional appropriation to pay for those expenses. I'm certainly open to different suggestions, and the reason we're having this meeting is to kind of hopefully partner up and figure out how the best course of action is forward. We can weigh all the options on that. So unless my board members have anything they want to add to this, I could ask Dan Spring, and then you can open it up to your board for discussion. But Bob or Nita, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not at this point, Mike.
No, I don't either have anything more.
Dan, it's open to your board.
Well, certainly it creates a little bit of a dilemma, but something that's not been totally unforeseen. As everyone knows, I mean, the demolition had come off the table because of the overrun on remediation for the elementary school. This is in the school modernization project. And when it came down to rebidding the possible demolition of that wing. And again, when people talk about the school has two major parts: the middle school wing and then what was the high school, the double-story wing. So never was there intent of doing a demo on the two-story piece of the property. So it was always the middle school wing. And I know even with fairly recent bids, we're talking $800,000 to $1 million that the town would have to incur in order to demo just the old middle school wing. So that's a little bit of the backdrop. I think what we're trying to do here is how is it impacting the current year's budget and what may have to be done given a little more time. And unfortunately, we're in the budget process for the next fiscal year. Now, looking at rent possibilities, as all of you may know, that it's governed by a trust indenture, which the covenant is that it should be for education. And I think there's some specificity to that. So it really creates a restriction. Beyond that, though, I mean, for the right leaser or leasee, the rent levels that we're talking about here in the pro forma are very, very low and very, very affordable relative to what we would be looking at on regular commercial property for southeastern Connecticut. I think we have an obligation to continue the maintenance of the building. I think in terms of developing the possible lease of the building, it does take time. And as the first selectman said, he's had an entity that has looked at the property even today. So, I mean, I think that in my opinion, we're going to have to give it a little time to see if marketing for a lease contract works. In the meantime, we're going to have to pony up on the expenses to maintain the building, which is an asset of the town. As far as the Board of Finance is concerned, let me say this, I don't see us taking on the responsibility of administering or governing, what happens in terms of leases, contracts, and so forth. What we're most concerned about is how it impacts the budget that we already have being executed and beyond. And certainly when we talk about an appropriation, we're usually looking at $100,000 plus over what's already been expended. So, and it's a matter of taking that to a town meeting and justifying it. So that's kind of the state of the state as I see it. If any of my members would like to join in or ask a question. Paul, I think you were first. Go ahead.
This is a question. Thanks for the background, Mike. Any indication about why leasing the building wasn't successful? Is it just the businesses changed their mind? It wasn't what they wanted, or is there something wrong with the building that maybe we need to look at?
Well, I think there's a combination of things there, Paul. I think there's always the public comment that they would make, whatever that might be. And I think that there are building issues that, every tenant has to consider. I mean, I think the town has been pretty clear about not wanting to put money into the building. And so we've done what I consider to be kind of the bare minimums to try to rent it out. But it's obvious that both wings need roofs. And we're not in a position where we're planning to replace the roofs. And we haven't been secretive about that. We want whoever goes in there to understand what they're getting into. I think it would be helpful if, the right entity who was willing to maybe get some grant fundings themselves or invest in the building. And that's how we've kind of approached it is, listen, we want to give a low rent, a reasonable rent, because we know you're going to have to invest your monies into the building. I also would say, my opinion is that we need to be united on trying to rent this building out. And I do think that there's been, I know some people have opinions about the building and they wish that it was a different way or whatever, but the people said that we should rent the building out. We went to vote on it. And, I think some of the comments that have been made publicly about whether it's the condition of the building or the PCBs are kind of like trying to really, in essence, scaring people away from the building hasn't really helped our case to try to get tenants in there. In this case, I don't know where the truth lies on that. I think we had some good potential partners there. It didn't work out. So I'm just saying, okay, let's try to forge forward and, work together on, trying to get some vibrancy in that building. I think there's a great potential there. And I think if we work hard over the next 8 months to try to get somebody in there, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, then all right, let's go on to the next thing, but at least we tried,
So you mentioned 8 weeks. Oh, sorry. You mentioned 8 months. Sorry. Is something magical about that? We've been trying to rent this out for a while. Do you think there's some work you want to do to it to try to get more rentable in those 8 months, or what's that number about?
I just feel like in my mind, no, there's nothing magical about it. And we haven't really been trying to rent it out for a while because we thought we had tenants and they fell through. So I think starting basically within the last week or so, we're definitely trying to actively advertise the place, work with a realtor, market it. I had an interview with the Westerly Sun this week, trying to get some publicity about the building. My reasoning saying 8 months or so is that I'd like to have a definitive direction in that time, because I really don't want to carry the building through another winter if possible. That's all I'm thinking about is it's expensive winter to deal with the building. So, I could see us having a conversation 8 months from now if we had no interest. Again, to me, the next best decision is to try to sell the building. I know that puts the Board of Ed having to move somewhere, maybe they have to move temporarily somewhere. I don't know. Those are bigger conversations that we have to have. And I hope we don't have to have, because I see the potential in the building. But that's why the 8 months, Paul.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just jump in for a minute, Carolyn, before you, was there any condition hinted from the entity that we were close to that could be satisfied, Mike?
I don't think so. I'd like to defer to them to talk about the reasoning behind it. I'd rather not comment on their reasoning, but I don't think the reasoning that I was understand publicly wasn't anything we could have satisfied.
All right. The other, I mean, something that comes to mind is that, as you know, there's a vocational center that is run by General Dynamics down in Westerly. I mean, I think that they've had a lot of interest there and a little bit of an overflow. And, I don't know if that space is something that could be satisfying of vocational training and whether or not that fits in with the covenants of the trust.
I think educational is a broad definition, and I think it would fit in quite nicely. And I think the person I met with yesterday who represents a consortium kind of is along those lines. So, we'll see where that goes. Unfortunately, I would say this. We have gone through the exercise now of, we have a lease. We had a subcommittee that put a lease together that we felt comfortable with. So a lot of the work is done. So it's a matter of, if we do have somebody that comes in, we can move much more quickly now because we've done a lot of the work thanks to the subcommittee. Bob, Christine, Gary and Nino was on that. We should be able to, move pretty expeditiously through it. So.
Can we put together an actual marketing strategy campaign where, we're doing a little bit more of a deep dive in terms of, let's put the action plan together as opposed to, okay, let's just put the word out there.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing now, Dan, with the help of a realtor. I think that was really important to get some help on board. I mean, clearly, listen, we're going in a million different directions at the town. We don't have the resources to be, marketing a property. We're doing the best we can here, but we need help, and we have help. So yes, that's going to happen.
Okay. Caroline, I'm sorry, I yield to you.
You're just muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say that I'm really disappointed that there's no public comments this evening at our meeting. I think the public has a right to have a voice here. Secondly, I'd just like to say that it is the job of the Board of Finance to restrain wasteful and extravagant spending. I think with the money and the resources that we're spending on this building that was supposed to have been torn down, the call to the vote back on February 18th, I have it right here, called for demolition of portions of the existing middle school and high school. So, I mean, I know the whole history, we all do, we don't need to rehash it. And I know that you're going to say that there was a vote in September, but I think people were led to believe that, there was somebody that was going to be renting the building, and there would be no cost or very little cost to the public and the taxpayers. I don't believe in throwing good money after bad. This is a sick building. That's why we had to build the new school, which we did. I just think that we need to do the right thing, and we need to recommend that the building be torn down and just pony up and come up with the money. However, we have to do that. That's just my opinion, and I know a lot of people in the public agree with that opinion. I would much rather spend our money and resources in investing in the two-story wing that we were supposed to be renting out, that people did have an interest in, that would not have been controversial. And it's very likely that they would have already been in there by now at this point, had everything else not had occurred the way it did. So I just think it's fiscally the right thing to do is to recommend the demolition and, put our resources into better things. I just think this is always going to be a point of contention. And I mean, I'm looking at the man hours that were spent by the town highway department already here. It says 295 man hours total. I mean, that's a lot of man hours. What were these people supposed to be doing for the town? They're supposed to be maintaining our roads and cutting back trees and, other things that are beneficial to all of the taxpayers. So, I mean, I'll let everyone else say how they feel, but I just don't agree with putting more money into this building. I'm sorry, especially in light of the fact that this fell through once again.
Just if I could, just so you understand, the man hours that have been spent from the highway crew, that is not inconsistent with what has been spent actually every year on the schools. So I have, like in 2018-19, we spent 356 man hours on in kind for the school. So yeah, it might go a little bit more than it was last year, but it's not inconsistent. And just so folks understand, special meetings, we rarely ever have public comment on it. So certainly not trying to shut the public out, but.
Well, this was supposed to be a Board of Finance meeting. So if it was a Board of Finance meeting and we were running the meeting, we would set the agenda and we could allow for public comments, which we all discussed and agreed upon at, I think, 2 or 3 meetings ago when this came up. So I disagree with that. I'm sorry.
Sarah, you're next.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. If we sold the building, does the trust indenture still apply?
It would. I would think the new buyer would have to deal with that, and they would buy it under those auspices. So, whether or not they are able to work out some sort of situation with those, I have no idea, but good question.
Okay, thanks. And I just want to make sure I understand. So the demo, I don't know. The only time I ever went in the building was when my daughter was going to school there. And I never noticed that one side was 2-story or one side was 1-story. So which part is the part that's supposed to be demoed? Is that the part where we have that big conference room where we've been using that for meetings, or the other side where the cafeteria is? Which part would be demoed?
So it's past where we had the last vote. If you were to continue to walk straight down that hallway,
Yeah.
instead of taking a right into the media center where the vote was, you would walk into the 2-story wing.
So everything that's being currently occupied now, like where the superintendent's office is, that's the part that's supposed to get demoed?
That's the part that's all supposed to stay.
Oh, and the part behind it is supposed to get
Yeah, so basically if you were to, and I can pull it up if that's of interest for anyone probably, but if you were to, when you first walk in the building, is if you're going to walk straight to where we vote, instead of walking straight, you take a left. That, where you would take a left, that's the middle school wing. That's what had been in 2017 or whatever, initially was supposed to have been demoed, which was called to be demoed. And then, as I said, and we went back and talked about trying to rent it out in September, and that passed affirmatively. So that's the course we're on right now, is to try to entertain that. I'm not saying that if we can't rent it out for some reason that we don't need to come back to the table and discuss it. But I feel like, it just happened in September. We, thought we had tenancy, we don't. And so now we're kind of just, at least I'm trying to hit the ground running to try to get all of these spaces rented out as best as I can. So.
Brett, you're next.
Good evening. Yeah, I just quite a few comments, but I'll start slow. I honestly think we're pushing this down the line is just costing the town more money. I think if we're focusing our energy on anything, we should be focusing it on the 2-story wing. As some of you know, I mean, I sat on the original, the old school building committee for 6 years. And this, from the start, was the building that was always supposed to come down. All the information led that it should come down, that it wasn't feasible, that it was in the worst shape out of any of the town buildings that we had with the school. I think if we just keep pushing another 8 months, now we're 8 months more under expenditures and underwater in this. I think we should talk about the process, how it was never brought to our attention or asked to go over, usually with a line item transfer. Dan, you said it at our last meeting, that it would come to the Board of Finance before that money was spent. As I look at what was done to the school, you have the man hours in there, but we don't have a full account of everything in the expenses that were done. And I think as Board of Finance, that's what was requested. I mean, we have block repair for Caswell, yet I don't see that in the transaction detail account. We have mini excavator, skid steer, and when you're building out a project, those hours are different than regular man hours. In 295 hours of town highway department, it's an expense that we really should have the accurate number on of what we're spending there, and we don't have that. This is all, it's to appease some of the questions, but it's not the full and accurate information. And when we look at the revenue projections, I have a hard time saying they're accurate. I would love those numbers, but a few months ago, we were told that we were lucky to get $5 a square foot for that building. We were lucky to get that, and that actually fell through. Yet our projections were projecting out $10 to $12 a square foot. So just like we've had issues with the solar project as being, a pie in the sky for revenue down the line, I feel like this is one of those things that we really need to take a hard look at it and look at, do we demo the one-story wing? Like Carolyn said, bite the bullet. We save money on the bridge. There's some money there, which is a great job. I think that's fantastic. But if we keep doing this, in 8 months from now, we've spent this much more money instead of really putting our efforts towards marketing that two-story wing that is supposed to be, we're just going to be in the same conversation down the line. Because Mike, I understand you've been trying to market it. You've had open houses. You've advertised that in the paper prior. You had an RFP for the two-story wing and not one responded. I think sometimes we have to look in the mirror and say, look, yeah, it'd be great if this happened, but it doesn't look like it is. And I just think that we set a bad precedent by spending the money without going over the details. And I bring up that sign, like I mentioned before, that's an extra cost that wasn't necessary. And it should have come to the board if it was unbudgeted. And those are just the little things, but we went over budget line item in this in August, and we're just talking about it now. And my last thing is, Dan, we mentioned having a member from the Board of Ed on this when we talked at our meeting, and you were going to request that. Did anyone request it? And do we have anyone to answer, their potential use or what they need to minimize, so we have a handle on those expenditures too?
No, the town has to, unfortunately bears the cost of the expenses right now. So the Board of Ed I did speak with the chairwoman about the meeting, but there was no formal ask to have anybody represent the Board of Ed. This was it's a Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen's meeting. It's really not, unfortunately, it's not their problem right now. It's our problem. But I hear everything you're saying, Brett. And, I think we had a vote in September to try. I think we thought we had people, we don't. And so I don't think there's really been a really hard effort to try to recruit people other than the RFPs and the normal processes you go through as a town. I think the marketing will, start now, and, we kind of do the best we can, but certainly open to suggestions from anyone. And Sarah, I'm sorry, I saw your hand up.
Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. So yeah, and thanks, Mike. I think what would be the most helpful or maybe most useful, and Dan, obviously I'll defer to you, but would be to understand the plan going forward. So I don't love the idea as a Board of Finance member having taxpayers pay $1 million to decom a building if it is truly rentable and salvageable. Mike, I did have a question for you about what were the areas that I think as you were seeing the people, either the lighthouse, the group that we thought was going to take it, and some of the other folks, what parts of the building were they most interested in? Like, what appears to be more marketable?
That's a good question. So actually, even the folks I walked through yesterday when they saw the middle school wing, they were more intrigued by that. To me, just as an outsider, I understand the limitations of the building, but I felt the same way when I saw the middle school wing. I feel like it visually, first of all, it has like an entrance that's a little bit more usable for someone off the Main Street side. We have a large cafeteria there. There's a kitchen, depending on what you want to, use it for. There's already lockers, there. It's in good shape as far as appearance wise. There's other issues depending on if you need to meet the codes as it relates to like the PCB stuff, certainly. And we've got the roof issues, but it depends on what somebody's looking for, but it presents better. It's a single floor. Granted, both sides of the building aren't perfect, so they both need help. Just a matter of trying to get it out there and seeing if there's interest or not, if that's what we want to do. I mean, that's what the voters said, and I don't like to just discount what the voters say and unless we feel it's absolutely necessary, but
Yeah, I think that, it has to be more of an exploration of what can we do within the guidelines of the trust indenture? Could it be a vocational center? Could it be a culinary school, for instance? Could it be an adjunct to, what EB is doing down in Westerly? Brett, before I refer to other people, has this ever been brought up at your committee, economic development?
Yeah,
Has it ever been on the agenda?
We've talked about it, and then the repurposing committee, they started that, and that took over. And actually, I think one of the leads that Mike talked about came from one of the things we were looking for on economic development. But from my understanding, they're not looking for that much space. And I just wanted to respond to Sarah. Part of the issue with this building and why the two-story wing was the focus to rental is because the PCBs are in the one-story wing. That is where the contaminants are. They weren't in the two-story wing, or they weren't.
They are in the two-story wing. They just we never tested in the two-story wing. Okay. So, the likelihood is that there's PCBs in the room I'm sitting in right now. We all know PCBs are in every single building. It's just right. Under school, there's different, there's different requirements and whatnot. And we never tested that side of the building. So,
right. But the one-story wing was known PCBs, and the windows were the major factor in that. And that's why the biggest cost was demo. I also, if it wouldn't hurt to put out a proper RFP to see what the knockdown would be. A lot of the people that bid on the last one, talked about how the RFP could have been written better to get more accurate numbers. And there's a lot of factors that could have brought that.
We had a very good RFP, Brett. I don't think that's accurate. We got good numbers, and they actually came in less than what they were. But I think that we all have to remember, we would have these expenses regardless of the middle school. I don't want to get off, because the middle school is just a portion of this building. These expenses would have happened regardless if the middle school was there or not there. That only is a third of the building. So a third of the expenses maybe wouldn't be there if we had demoed it at the $1 million or whatever it was to take it down. But still, we would be stuck with this situation with the rest of the space and this overrun on expenses, which is the purpose of the meeting tonight, is to talk about that. And, I will say, I said this, this will probably be the third time I'm saying it tonight, but I think economic development, it would be really helpful if we did have a united front on this, because we continue to leave meetings and everyone's not behind something. And I think, it was a great idea to have this meeting, because I think we do need to be united on whatever front it is we go forward, so that we can potentially have success. If we're all together on it, it makes it a lot more achievable, to try to see something through. So
I understand having a united front, and I'm all for it, but I also have a conscience, and knowing the issues with that building, it's hard to get behind that and project these numbers and push it as a great opportunity for school. Yes, maybe for adult education, but I also know the some of the commercial real estate in the area. And this needs a lot of work to make it usable. I mean, we looked at it for EDC when we were talking about an indoor farmer's market there. We toured it, we looked at it, and we looked at some of the issues with it, and it wasn't feasible. And those are the things I'd love to get, an EDC would love to get behind something, but some things are feasible and not. I'd love to get behind the 2-story wing and help push that as much as possible. But I really have a hard time with it.
It's the same building, right? It's the same building. So I see there's other questions. I don't know. Dan?
Brett, for all that you're saying, I mean, I think EDC could have a little more of a commitment as to, okay, what can we do with this town asset?
Okay.
Ann? Ann, can't hear you. Ann,
You're
can't hear
muted.
you.
There, better? Sorry about that. I just wanted to speak to the demolition of the middle school portion. Yes, we had a vote, and yes, the taxpayers voted to pursue renting out the middle school. But I think that's because, like Bob said last night, the options they had were do nothing with it or rent it out. And in that case, well, yeah, the obvious thing to do is to try to rent it out. Otherwise, it's just sitting there costing you money. But I think if the vote went out with a third option of demo it, the answer might be a little different.
I think, in terms of developing that question though, Ann, we put out the fact that it would cost the town, and we had response from, I think, 4 or 5 different vendors that it would be $800 to $1 million to demo. And, the hope was that through the modernization of both the new school and the elementary school, but we had the overrun on remediations. I mean, that's something we had to meet the top priority, and we did that. So now we're left with that middle school wing. So again, it was just the demo of the middle school, which Mike points out was 1/3 of the expenses that we're talking about here, because it was never the 2nd story wing.
Oh, I understand that.
I think the other thing, not to re-discuss, I mean, this is discussions we already had, but, again, when you take down that building, and honestly, we can do whatever. I mean, it's no skin off my back. I'm just trying to do what we think makes the most sense for the town. But, when you take that building down, you open the village up to Route 2 completely. You change graduation at the school. I mean, it changes a lot of things that we've become accustomed to there. So if we had some vibrancy, some employees in there, some people who could spend money in North Stonington, it just seemed to make sense. And I think we should give it a good try. I mean, that's what makes sense to me, at least to try it. But.
Paul, I think I saw you up next.
Yeah, please, thanks. So tonight, I think we're here to talk about some transfers. Mike, you started out the meeting saying that the authority is theirs by state statute to move monies from line item to line item. It's been my experience that the Board of Selectmen have always come to the Board of Finance as the oversight committee to ask permission to do that. Are you saying you don't need to do that?
No, that's not what I said. And if I didn't say that, what I said is we statutorily can exceed a line item as long as we don't exceed a department. And that's not our practice. We don't do that. I mean, if you look at our track, at least since I've been here, our track record, we have very few transfers, and generally would always come, when have to transfer money from line to line, we do have to come to the Board of Finance. My intention throughout this, knowing when we passed the budget, knowing that we were going to go over budget, was that to get towards the end of the fiscal year, sometime around May, and then go for the additional appropriation to the Board of Finance. The other situation that we're in right now is that I would like this to go before voters. I think it's important that the voters are included. And we are right now having the worst COVID-19 crisis that we've had since the very beginning. I have no interest in going to any sort of a town meeting in the situation that we're in right now. I think we can statutorily continue to pay the bills. And that I would suggest, and this is what I had planned to do all along, come to the Board of Finance officially with a transfer request, probably in like the April timeframe when we have a better sense of where we're going to end up. I don't want the Board of Finance to think that by doing that, we would be spending any more than we ever would. I mean, we're talking about bare minimum type expenses at this point forward. And I know maybe you have some debate about some of those expenses that have taken place. But in general, they've been utilities, maintenance contracts, and that's all the type of stuff that we have going forward. We had a small roof leak. It's all been outlined for you. We don't have any other expenses that we anticipate besides those coming up. So
when you say you can spend money as long as you don't bust a budget of a particular department, so like the highway department is something you're talking about. This is
correct.
This is school maintenance or whatever this is. So you are making changes from line item to line item within that department?
No, we're exceeding the line.
Just the one line within that budget. So you're saying
Correct.
it's okay to shift those monies around within the department.
We not without coming to you guys, we right now we have a negative balance in that line. So what normally we would always do, Paul, and ever since I've been here, I can't think of an instance that we didn't do it this way. If we know we're going to go over or we have exceeded a line, we come to the Board of Finance and we request a transfer. The Board of Finance approves it, and then we make it right so it appears right on the budget. We want to do that whole process.
Yeah, that's my recollection too. That's why I was a little confused.
Yep.
My misunderstanding. So any those transfers within line items within a department, the Board of Selectmen make those decisions as the weeks and months go on, as a rule. Is that true? I mean, your whole board makes those decisions.
Mike, can I say something?
Yeah, please.
So we're not transferring any expenditures. We are making all expenditures out of B 2710. We are overrunning line item B 2710, but the overall B 27 highway department is not being overspent. So the statute says that you cannot overspend the department, not a specific line item. So just B 27 as a whole. And as we said, we're not transferring anything. We're not moving anything. We are spending everything out of one line item so that we can keep track of exactly how much money is being spent for this facility. And then we would do an additional appropriation request to cover that expenditure.
Okay, starting to get my head around it now. Okay, thank you.
Mike Anderson, you were up next.
All right. Please forgive me if I'm not as informed as other people seem to be on this, but I want to go back to a point that Caroline made on, she seemed to imply that the middle school wing has had a deleterious effect on being able to lease out the two-story wing. Is that true, Mike?
I don't think that there's been any impact from one to the other. Honestly, I think the biggest challenge has been that this is a town building and the town's people have a lot of opinions, and some of those were vocally spoken. And, if I'm a business, if I don't have, we haven't rolled out the red carpet. And I think that's been our biggest challenge. I think we need to roll out the red carpet. We get, if we get an agent involved, which we are, we're going to really market the place. I don't think having the middle school or the two-story, having one available and the other has been any problem whatsoever. I think the confusion has come from people in town having opinions, making those vocalized, and not being united on the front of trying to get this entire facility rented out.
I just wanted, and I agree with that. I'm just trying to understand, are you trying to market these things separately, together, whatever? Whoever has interest, if they have interest in both, they get both. If they only want one, you can take one. What's been the process there?
So the process has been different because we thought we had tenancy in a part of the building which just fell apart. So far I had, what's that?
Which part were they looking at?
It was part of the middle school wing. So I can actually, let me pull it up on the screen so we can see that.
There might be
Every-
other people that are listening into this that, that
Yeah.
don't really,
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So I have my cursor here. So right now, this space, which I'm circling with my cursor, is the space that we have listed with the agent. Then I'm circling this space over here, which includes, the entrance on the Main Street side in blue that we thought we had rented out, which we now do not have rented out. And then the two red spaces represent the two-story wing. So my opinion now is that we should just try to rent all the space out and work with the agent to try to rent it out. I mean, we now have it all available. I think we just go all in on trying to see what we get for tenancy. And if we don't get tenancy in the building, then we regroup. And like I said, I feel like 8 or so months is a good time to regroup. I mean, just based on the conversation I had yesterday with this gentleman, I think there's great potential there. I really do. And it could be revenue producing for the town. But on the other side of the coin, if we chose to sell the building, which to me is the better option than trying to demo and have to tax the taxpayers for that, that's a heck of a lot better and easier for the town. This is a lot of work for us to do. And I think we've just tried, at least I feel like I've just tried to come up with decisions that make the most sense for the townspeople, by working through the processes that we have. So, that's all I can say about it.
Dan Smith, we haven't heard from you. I know you had your
I
hand
just had
up.
one more follow-up after that,
Oh, okay.
please.
Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
I'll yield to Mike so you can continue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I just had a question about the roofs. You said that, there's needs to be roof replacement on both sections. How long do you think we have on that, Mike?
It's all piecemeal right now. It's, I don't know, Mike. To be honest with you, I mean, it's, we had to do a couple of minor repairs on the middle school side. That could have easily been the other side as well. They need to be fixed. I think the hope is we would get a tenant who, yes, a roof is expensive, but if you negotiate a low enough situation with them that they're comfortable with, hopefully they'd want to put that kind of money into the building. But, I really don't know. It's imminent.
Okay.
You all
Do you
set?
think we can survive the 8 months to?
Yeah. I mean, if we don't have some major, I mean, I can't guarantee that, but yes, I think if we are very careful with when we're up there, we're treading very carefully. Yes, I think we can survive the 8 months. But if there's a major event, that could be out the window, who knows? So.
Okay, thanks. Dan, go ahead, buddy.
Dan Smith.
I know it's been a while since you guys heard from me. I have a couple of questions. What is if we went to list this to sell, what is the market value estimated for that building as a whole?
I have not explored that, Dan. I think that I've learned over the years, try to get a little bit more opinion from more people before I start investigating things like that. I could only just estimate what the market value would be, but
Okay.
it's a decent parcel. So
Yeah, and the other question is, maybe this is towards Dan Spring, and if we were to add a contingency, well, the roof kind of scares me because it sounds like a ticking time bomb when it comes to this. If we were to, which say, what would $200,000 additional be in mill rate?
A little less than a half a mil.
A little less than a half a mil to the budget itself.
Yes.
So which
To
say
the
point,
taxpayers.
yeah,
Yeah.
to the taxpayers. So we're looking at potentially with maybe a contingency for the roof just to make even repairs or major repairs possibly about a half a mil just to carry it for 1 year with the hopes to rent it, sell it, something. These issues, the PCB issues and the roof issues have been well known. I've been in town since 2012. Ever since I've moved to town, they've talked about PCB issues and the roof having issues with, and we got a new school because of it. I don't think people chirping either on Facebook or talking in town in the last 6 months about this kind of deferred when we were putting votes for the school year after year, talking about how many issues and how bad that wing was and it needed to be tore down. I'm just thinking that I think years and years and years of saying how bad that building was had a lot to do with it. Once people started doing some investigating to it. I yield.
Thank you. Bob Carlson, we hear from you.
Sure, thank you. First, Sarah, just for a little history lesson on the building. So the middle school wing, which is the one-story wing, was built in 1950. The high school wing, which is a two-story wing, was built in 1964. So right there, the two-story wing is 14 years younger than the one-story wing, and it seemed to have less problems. The media center, which we have Board of Ed meetings in that you've probably seen, that was actually totally redone in 1994 because that was the old gymnasium for the high school building before we built the gymatorium. So when we started talking about the building of the new schools and what we were going to have left, there was a consensus that we would take down the building that was built in 1950 and maintain the newer building, which had less problems, which was the 1964 building. So that's that. Speaking about selling the building, I know, Mike, that was your first option, but I'm pretty sure that the Board of Ed has to stay in that building for 10 years or we're going to have to refund the reimbursement that was done during the building of the new schools and the new roof on that building. I think by law, they have to stay there for 10 years or that has to be returned to the state. So I think we would need to check into that before we even if we had to refund that to the state, though, my opinion is, who cares? I mean, then we don't have the problem anymore. So, and you've mentioned now I haven't spoken much tonight because I've done a lot of speaking in the last two Board of Selectmen meetings, but I want to see what the Board of Finance had to say. You talk about a united front. It seems like it's, and I hate to disagree with you on this, but it seems like you'll back a united front as long as it's the united front that you want to back. Because I'm not on the same page as you when it comes to this, as we've spoken. I want the middle school down. I want all the effort to go into the two-story wing to be rented out. And that's the way I always felt the town wanted it to be. I still think the town does want it to be that way. So I'd say that 80% of the efforts so far in renting those buildings have all been geared towards the one-story wing. And that was the wing that was supposed to come down. It was the wing that needed the most work done to it. So I don't know why we haven't concentrated our efforts on the two-story wing. I mentioned this back a year ago when I was talking to Pam Patemry about it, to say, when she had mentioned someone was looking at the one-story wing, said, why aren't we looking at the two-story wing, which is the building that's supposed to be up? And that was before we even knew for a fact that the one-story wing wasn't going to come down, because we didn't know at that point that there wasn't going to be enough money left. So my feeling is, as far as the united front goes, it's going to be tough to do, Mike, if it has to be strictly the way you want it, because I don't agree with your point.
So I'll be honest with you. If the united front of everyone is to either rip down the building or sell it or whatever, I'm totally fine with whatever. So if you feel my agenda is being pushed, it's only because it seems to make sense to me to eliminate this option in the course of action that we go through on these buildings. I thought we would have the building potentially rented out before the winter. That was the goal. The processes in town tied things up longer. There was a lot of reasons that things got dragged out or whatever, and they just took longer than I would have hoped they would have. This is what makes sense to me. However, listen, I am completely open-minded to other options. If everyone here wants to be on a united front to go to try to rip both buildings down, I can tell you my life will be a lot easier. This is taking a lot of my time in the middle of a pandemic, so I'm happy to have more conversations about those things. I mean, tonight we're talking about maintenance costs that we have to pay, but certainly we can have further discussions about that kind of stuff. So.
Bob, so on your point, just to make it clear, you would support going to the townspeople for $800,000 to $1 million, $800,000 to $1 million for demolition?
What I would go support was go to the townspeople to find out if that was what the pulse of the town was. And if it was, then I would say that a combination of an appropriation from the Board of Finance going back to the state as far as possibly some grant money or some low interest loan money. That's what I would come up first. I come up and get a hard number on what the demolition of the one-story wing would be. And then I would try to find that money through either the town or through the state. And then come back to the town and say, this is what we just saved $120,000 on Boom Bridge. So that could be 10% of it right there. So anyway, I just think that if we talk to the town and so where the town was, I think you'd find, as Ann said, when you give the choice of an empty building or a rented building, they're going to vote for a rented out building. But the third choice of knocking it down was not part of that referendum.
Sarah?
I just, can we get, maybe, I want to get back to the numbers and thanks Bob for the background. So, the options are tear down a third of the building for $800,000 to $1 million. It's probably closer to $1 million now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, because I'm imagining it takes longer and there's more stuff there. Plus, we still have the expenses, right? I feel like there's a lot of history, and thank you, Bob, for the history lesson. For the point, I also feel like a little bit of deja vu, because I feel like, and apologies to all my board members, but I feel like we're having the same conversation over and over again. Can we agree on like something to agree on for this meeting? Like, can we say, are we going to address the transfers, or are we going to address like the future strategy of it? Like, what is it we want to accomplish here? Because I'm struggling, to be honest.
I think for the sake of the Board of Finance, we have to know what the impact is going to be to the current budget and know what's coming. But then, because we're going to be soon in the budget process, we need to have the package include, if those buildings are still existent as they are now, what it's going to cost. So those are the two pieces we need.
Yeah.
The Board of Finance can help in terms of maybe thinking outside the box, what we can do to help facilitate, this asset to a better ground for the town.
Yeah.
But the asset is really not for us to administer.
Right.
We want to know what it's going to cost the budget.
Yeah. So I just, since I have the floor, and then I'll yield because I see lots of hands. So I think, we've had this conversation with Christine in our monthly meetings. We knew the budget was going to go over. I think if we need to come to a reasonable agreement on how long we're comfortable letting that go over, or what like the next steps are for monitoring it and addressing it, I think that would be valuable. I agree that there needs to be a period of time to see if I feel personally there needs to be a period of time to see if the leasing option is feasible, because otherwise, like we're just going to sink further into a hole. So at least a leasing option to me moves us forward, gets some revenue for the town, gets jobs in the town. Whether we do a parallel process of assessing sale or assessing demo, fine. But like we have to move forward. Like we have to be able to actually stop talking about it and move forward. So I guess that's my ask. And I don't know exactly how we procedurally do that, but it would be good if we could.
Yeah, I think the administration of what you're asking comes from the Board of Selectmen and is presented to the Board of Finance in terms of consequences to the current budget and what the budget may be for the next fiscal year, which will soon be entertaining. Anne, I think I saw your hand first, then yours, Caroline.
Well, I was just going to say, we've discussed everything except the costs that that Carolyn or Christine put together for us. So at some point, I think we really have to move forward and start talking about the costs.
Yeah, so those are the numbers that are going to hit the budget potentially this year. So.
Right, but I think there's still a lot of questions on that, and I think there may be some things that are still missing from it, and so I think we really need to start trying to address getting a complete picture of what it costs.
What do you think is missing?
Well, some of the things I have down are internet costs, phone costs, trash, water, sewer, janitorial costs.
So the Board of Ed, we discussed last night at the Board of Selectmen's meeting that the Board of Ed is going to be covering the internet for the portions of the building that the town and the Board of Ed are using, the phones for our offices that are in there, which is the registrar, that's covered in the town's budget. Water is SCWA, I'm sorry, I should have spelled that out. That's the Southeastern Connecticut Water Authority, so that's covered under utilities. The sewer, we're on the septic system, so only if it needs to be pumped out do we need to worry about that. So I'm not gonna worry about that right now. Trash removal, the Board of Ed is taking care of their trash, and any potential tenant would be responsible for their own trash removal. That's laid out in the draft lease. I tried to be as all-encompassing as I could with these.
Right.
And one thing I just want to point out with the repairs, the 2 HVAC repairs that are on here, the systems are all kind of intermingled. So even if the middle school wing didn't exist, we still will need to do HVAC maintenance. We still needed to fine tune the system. And the boiler systems that are in the middle school wing are actually the newer of the systems. So the only true what middle school wing repair that I would point out is, that I would say is the roofing, and Mike can correct me because he was there with the roofers, I was not. But other than that, it's all, you have to think of it as one building. All the systems are interconnected, and it's one building that is many, many square feet. So I know this number looks like, well, this number is a lot, but the majority of it would still exist, as Mike had said, whether the middle school wing was demolished or not, because we still have where the central administration is, where the media center is, and the 2-story. So I hope that helps a little bit with any potential missing information.
Yes.
And you can continue if you've got something else.
Okay. Well, yeah, I have a lot of questions on the costs.
Are you saying you're not satisfied with what Christine just said to you?
Oh, no, not that. It's just, I have a lot of questions on the information that was presented that she sent out to us.
Okay.
Okay, for example.
Is there any reason why we should be looking at something that's inaccurate at this point?
What?
From the Board of Selectmen or Christine, is there any reason why we should think that what has been presented to us is inaccurate?
No, it's confusing. For example, Eversource gives 2 gas bills per month. And is that, how are those divided?
I have no idea. There's 2 separate meters in the building. I don't know if the maintenance staff of the school knows that information, but the town does not have that. Mike and I actually discussed that today.
Okay.
There's 1 electric meter and 2 gas meters, but I don't know the delineation.
Okay. Okay. My next question was, there are 3 Eversource bills in August that aren't the gas bills, but for every other month, there's only 1.
Could be the generators. Is it generators?
I'll have to go back and double check. We may have put one of the bills for another building into this, but I'll take a look at the account numbers on them and double check that they were put in the right account.
Okay. Let's see. The figures for the MCOR service contract is roughly, under maintenance, you have it as 10,000.
Those are three separate things. So the maintenance service contract is to change filters and do inspections and annual tune-ups. Those two repairs are actual invoices separate.
Right, I understand that. But the service contract is roughly 10,000. The MCOR value for October is roughly a quarter of that. So are they coming out 4 times a year?
Yes, it's billed quarterly and they're coming out quarterly to change filters.
All right, and the same thing with the elevator?
The elevator, they come out once a month, but they bill it quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, and I would say, in my own heart of hearts here, I'm not concerned about the maintenance line items. Tell me what it's going to cost the budget in total. And if the figures aren't accurate, we need to have accurate figures, but that's really what we're trying to get to.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get a full picture of all the costs and where they fit in.
Yeah, but would you need to know that for the town hall, for instance, or for public works, or?
Did you see the estimates, Ann, that we provided? We provided a list of estimates on one of the attachments.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was where we're working off of. Yeah.
And if this helps at all, I incorporated any actuals in the estimates. So if you just look at the estimates sheet, that should give you the full picture of the year. Some of those costs have been realized in the expenses and some have not. But the estimates can be a standalone document.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, the way to look at it, if we've had expenditures estimated at 38 or 39,000, that would be a deduction from the 155,000 that they're estimating an actual. So we would still have an added liability there of 110, 115,000. Are you all set, Ann, for the moment?
Well, if you don't think I need to be asking questions, then yes, I guess I am.
I think you should ask as many questions as you have, Ann. The point of the meeting is so everyone can get comfortable. So if there's other questions that we can answer, I'm very happy to answer them. I'm sure Christine is as well.
Okay. Well, do other people have questions, or shall I keep going?
Well, since you're kind of on this line, why don't we finish with you?
Okay.
That way we clear that line of thought.
All right. In the estimates, I don't see where labor is listed. So all of the man hours that were spent doing work.
Yep, so that's all incorporated in the highway's regular time. So it's no additional cost, but our highway foreman does a really good job of tracking all the projects that they're working on.
Right,
Yeah.
but if we're going to rent out the building and still provide these services, it's going to be part of the cost, wouldn't it?
Yes, those are all included in the CAM charges when we're looking at the revenue. That's the common area maintenance.
Okay. Where is that listed? I'm sorry. I see that listed on revenue. I don't see it listed on expenses.
It's not an expense, it's expenses that we're already taking out of other places in the budget.
So with regards to highway, we provide in-kind services to the school. We have, long before today. And that's something that it is a little bit different, that this would be a building we'd be renting out. So, but things like snow plowing, things like that, those have always been provided. I kind of mentioned the fact that, in most years we're running, 350 man hours, between, 250, 350 man hours and in-kind work to the school as it is. So that isn't listed on here, but it is something we do track to make sure we keep track of it.
And the expenditures on here are expenditures that are coming out of B2710, or if we move it to another new line item, it would come out of that. So these are actual checks that the town would be cutting, is how you would look at this spreadsheet.
Okay. And supplies for the work come out of
The highway budget.
the highway budget too. Okay.
Anything else, Ann?
I'll hold for now.
Okay. Kind of lost who was next. I know, Dan, you've had your hand up before. Brett, I know that at least. Go ahead. Dan?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. We're charging basically under $2 a square foot for the Board of Ed. Are we really counting that as true revenue to the town as a profit? Or is that just an accounting thing where we're just saying, all right, well, it comes from the taxpayer, we pay we pay it, money splits out between the general fund and the Board of Ed, but the money is just swapping back and forth because we're charging them rent. It's kind of like having a parent giving their kid, an allowance, but then charging them rent. It's not really genuine revenue profit.
No, it's not, Dan. You're right. Last year going into the arrangement, we just knew we weren't sure how it was all going to work out. So we just came up with a bare bones number that we felt would cover the basic costs of the facility for the Board of Ed space. And I actually think we were fairly accurate with that $1.98 a square foot or close. This coming year, we're planning to budget for them to use, to pay not pay $1.98 a square foot, but to pay their share of the utilities for 13% of the building, or thereabouts. So you're absolutely right in your observation. It really was just a matter of trying to cover the cost of what they were utilizing.
It's just if you have somebody coming in absolutely stone cold on this and they look at it and they say Board of anticipated revenue and they see Board of Ed, they're thinking that this is incoming profit that we're going to be seeing from this building. Unlike where it's coming from, unlike it's coming from another renter outside of the town where it would be potential profit. We're just shuffling the money back and forth between the Board of Ed and general government.
Right, but for the purposes of the budget and the town, the Board of Ed will cut us a check and it will be deposited into one of the revenue lines, so it is technically revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a
stretch.
Well, that's just how we had to account for it. This is a draft document for our purposes anyways, Dan. We would certainly wouldn't put this out there for people to try to interpret. So
I get it. I just want to make sure that everybody else on the call sees that and they don't say, oh well, we're going to get 17.5 from the Board of Ed anticipated for 2021. No, it's not considered technical outside revenue or considered profit to the undesignated fund. It's not that. It's for accounting purposes, basically, to track how much you would have for a square footage cost to the Board of Ed.
Yes. Yep. The revenue is coming in from the Board of Ed to offset the charges.
So my next thing, and I have to kind of agree with Sarah on this one, and we need to just cut to the chase and figure out as a board what we're willing to how far we're willing to let this leash go out financially. You know, do we want to go a year? Do we want to go only, do you want to go a month? I think we need to come to a realization we're stuck with this for a while, how we're going to pay for it. And I think we need to start coming up with some numbers. Either we want to start working some stuff in parallel where we send out RFPs out to see what the demo is going to look like, where, you know, where Bob was going with, where, you know, we look at short-term financing, we look at potentially renting it out. I think we need to start working some stuff in parallel because we're going to be on the hook for this and we can't work these things in series. And we're sitting here in August, it's not rented. We're still accruing more and more money because utility costs went up, roof went, and the place is still sitting there and we're $200,000 into this. I think we need to work this thing in parallel. Was that?
Dan, I think if there has been a resolution and an agreement by the taxpayers to look at leasing that, which I think happened in September, was it?
Yeah, but Dan, here's the problem. When that vote went out, they had two potential almost slam dunk companies basically lined up ready to rent it. And it was either leave it vacant or rent it to these two people and make a profit. That's not the case now.
So I think we have to be careful about analyzing why people voted the way they did. I'm not disputing your facts, Dan, you are right. There was definitely more probability of actual tenants at the time, but we don't know why people vote the way they do.
Yeah.
My opinion as the first selectman in town is that we should attempt to go all in on trying to rent this place out for the next, as I said, 8 months. And if we don't have results, then we should look at a different option. And I'll tell you, my initial thought is to look to sell the building. That's my opinion. I can, my board can discuss the other options in more detail. But you guys have to you're right, Dan, you have to figure out how you want to proceed with it regards to the costs. So.
Because I'm just saying that we should be looking at all options and working everything in parallel instead of waiting 8 months and then find out we can't get rid of it and we have to sell it or we have to demo it and it's 8 months down the line and we're working everything in chunks where we're saying, all right, well, we're going to try to do this. And then, well, that didn't work. Well, we're going to try to do this. Well, or we're going to do it for 8 months and that's 16 months. And then we're going to do another 4 months of this. And then we're out 24 months. Then we're carrying this thing for 2 years. It's just, I think that we need on the Board of Finance side and the Board of Selectmen side as a unified front, kind of work everything in parallel saying, all right, it's going to cost this much a demo. We don't even have a market value for the school yet if we wanted to sell it. The school's worth this much. It's going to cost this much to demo. And we've been actively trying to lease it. And it took 8 months. Nobody wants it. These are your options. Demo it or sell it.
Well, we already know the demo number. So the only thing we don't know is what the market value is of it. And I am more than happy to obtain that in parallel, just to know the number if you would like. So we have that as well. I don't have any problem getting that.
I think we need to look at, financing if we have to pay a penalty to the state. Yeah, start greasing some skids on this stuff because 8 months go pretty quick, especially in a pandemic. We don't know what we're going to be doing in another 3 months. I think we need to do our due diligence to start working some of this stuff in parallel, and that's my thought.
Okay, again, I think that a lot of these responsibilities, unfortunately, lie on the shoulders of general government, and I would agree. I think I was saying that in the beginning. I also think that economic development can step in and see what they can do as well, and kind of in collaboration. Brett, and then Mike, after Brett.
Dan, I just want to mention on the EDC front, it is something that we've talked about and looked at, but it's not necessarily our charge, and we haven't been brought in by the first selectman to do it, and we were never even made aware of when those open houses were. We weren't asked to participate. I did get an email from Mike the other day that the gentleman from the consortium reached out to him. But I think we are getting borderline irresponsible as Board of Finance to not really push this one way or another and really get to the bottom line. It's so easy to talk about things idealistically. We need to look at the facts and the data and stop relying on the opinions and the hunches. The revenue projections aren't real in this proposal. We have no tenants at $5. How are we going to have them at $10? What is real is we have a building with real issues, roof issues, PCBs. And this is the reason that the new school was justified. Dan, you were on that committee. Like, these are the real things. The maintenance costs are real. The overspending is real. And there's no relief in sight on any of this. There's nothing. If we want to be on the same page, we have to critically look at it without a PR spin and decide the best way out of this situation. Like, we really need to act now, and waiting isn't an option. You know, I have to disagree with Mike. I don't think we have accurate demo numbers. I've talked to quite a few, more than one, about 3, people that are in the business. And they said, in their opinion, the RFP was horribly written and open to a lot of interpretations and a lot of add-ons. And they said, 2 of them said the best way that we can get accurate numbers is to put out to bid the actual demolition and then the town pay the bill for the hot material. Because the way that everyone was bidding on it is that all the material in that building was hazardous and hot. So
Brett, so here's the thing, Brett, with all due respect, you spend so much time looking at all these things that aren't really like in they're not your job to look at, right? So at the meetings we had where we had tenants that were potentially going to be there, and you're the economic development chairman, instead of trying to court these people, you spent the time talking about the process and all the problems with things. And I think that's what I'm trying to talk about, is to be united on a front moving forward. Now, if that front is united towards demolition, that's okay with me. I mean, that's okay with me. It's just, it seemed to make sense to me to exhaust our options, to try unitedly to rent the building out, because it seemed that it could make some revenue for the town and would be less on the taxpayers' backs to do that. But if there's a different direction we're going to go in, I'm certainly happy to bring it back to the board. I just think we're not having enough patience with the process right now. We just lost the tenants and we are just getting listed with a realtor. So I really think we need to let that process play out a little while, see how it looks, and then, you know, kind of go from there. I mean,
I think we've exhausted the options. And from what I understand, you're listing it with just the one or the 2-story wing, or no, the 1-story wing that wasn't the lighthouse wing was the one that you voted on to list with the realtor at the selectmen's meeting. It wasn't the 2-story wing or the lighthouse wing. It was only the wing that originally Coastal Academy was looking at. So correct me if I'm wrong, did the selectmen vote to list both the other 2 parts of the building with the realtor?
I think the vote was for the middle school wing, Brett. So I'm not really sure. I have to go back and look at that one.
It's on video. We can check on it. But I do think
sure you will.
Getting a realistic, Mike, I'm not trying to argue with you. This is a serious issue that we've known about for years. Let's not pretend that it just started. This is real. So with that, I do think getting the accurate numbers of what the building maintenance has cost us would be accurate, would be helpful, sorry.
So you have that tonight. You have all that.
Honestly, I don't have all that tonight. So
no, you do have all that tonight, Brett. We did provide to you all of the both projections and what we've actually spent. So the agenda item tonight, and we are getting off topic here, is the discussion of the utilities and maintenance at the building. So okay, I'd like to try to bring it back into that discussion, and let's talk about exactly what we want to do about those utilities and expenses.
Okay, I'm going back there right now. So what do you guys use for an average cost for the highway department? I understand that this is not anything extra, but when the highway foreman did his budget, these hours must have been allocated to another project or something else, or there's misbudgeting going on. I noticed that the highway overtime budget is up over 200% over a line item. Does this have anything to do with this? Or is that might be a separate issue, but I noticed we're at 209% over budget on our highway overtime.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with this, so.
Okay, so that's another issue I guess the Board of Finance will have to look at too.
What report are you looking at that you're seeing that? Because I do not have that.
B27084.
What's the date on the report, Brett?
I'll have to go back. Hold on.
I have a panicked sound because I had no idea that anything, so there's got to be something in wrong line. So I just.
I wrote it in my notes. Let me pull it up.
So it doesn't have to do with this conversation. So what other questions do you have that we could try to get to with
I'll get back to you on that. So do we have an average cost for our highway department so we can account that to the 295 hours? I think that would be good so we can really look at the hard numbers.
Yeah, so like I said, Brett, like I've tried to explain to you, Brett, or the board, that is not outside of a normal in-kind number that we would see every year for highway in-kind work that we do at the school.
Okay, so, but it wasn't budgeted for
every year we account for the fact that we have in-kind work to do with the school. So yeah, it's budgeted in some way or another with man hours, but.
Okay, so what's the number that you guys use for an average hour?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that number tonight, but
okay,
that's not outside of a normal expenditure. So I mean, I would say you're nitpicking a little bit about something that to me isn't really like the big picture here. And I think we've provided most of the big picture. Sarah, I see you have your hand up.
I'm not done. Like this is why, honestly, Carolyn brought it up in the beginning of the meeting. This was requested to be a Board of Finance meeting so we can ask these questions and not be silenced. I'm sorry, but there's
You've been talking for 10 minutes. You've certainly not been silenced, Brett. Please do continue though.
Okay. The block repair, the contractor Caswell, where was that paid out of? It's not on the transaction detail.
So the highway foreman must have put it into a different line item. It's his budget. So if he opted to put it somewhere else, that's what he did.
So those are the issues. We don't have an accurate accounting of what we're spending in maintenance on this building. And like I said, not all of this is maintenance, obviously, the Eversource and those things aren't, but all these numbers contribute to that. So if the Board of Finance can't get accurate numbers on where this money's coming from for all these repairs, how are we supposed to logically make decisions and talk about it if we only get half truths and half the numbers? That's it. I won't go down further in my list because if we can't get answers, it is pointless.
Christine or Mike, do you have anything to bring closure to his statement?
I don't believe that closure would be possible. Do you have other questions? Somebody else?
Carolyn, I think you had your hand up for a while, and then we'll come up to you, Mike, and then Ann.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so under B27.10 town property maintenance, what other buildings maintenance is paid out of that? Like, do you have to pay stuff for the CES building and the rec building, the town hall? I mean, is that for all town buildings? That line item?
That's a question for, I don't, Mike, unless you have information.
For what that line is, I believe it is we would use that for town buildings that we would need to use the money for. So okay. Yes, we've definitely used it for this building.
So you're already over budget. And are there any other expenses and problems at any other town buildings that have to be taken care of? between now and the end of the fiscal
No,
year?
not right now. And I mean, unfortunately, we all approved the budget with nothing in this line. I mean, we all did that together.
That's not my question. Are there
Yeah.
problems with any other town buildings, like the CES building or the rec building or any other
No.
building right now that you're aware of that need to be repaired and paid out of this line item you're already over budget on?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Mike, you're up next. Mike Anderson.
I guess, going back to trying to figure out a way forward here with what we're doing. We have a line item that we're already in the red on. So we have to figure out how we're going to plug that. We're in the middle of budget season, so we have to decide, what's going to happen with that line item for next year. And we're going to have a vote from the town when we do this referendum on the budget, if we can do that with COVID, to decide whether, that's going to be a chance for the taxpayers to tell us, do they want to spend another however X million dollars that we're going to come up in that line item to maintain that building, or are they going to shut us down and say, no more? We're going to give you minimal dollars and you're going to have to demo it. So my point being is we have basically 5.5 months before we have to put a budget forth to the town, maybe 5 months. Correct?
Yes.
And in the meantime, we're going to have to figure out, we go to, to Brett's questions, to Carolyn's question just now, and what Ann was going through, accurate numbers. Mike and Christine and Nita and Bob, you're going to have to come up with to figure out exactly what this thing is costing us, so we can figure out what else we're going to need to appropriate for this, and B, what's going to be in that line item for next year should should we continue with the sale situation or with the lease situation, with knowing that we may not have a tenant in there. But I think to satisfy everybody, let's go full out with everybody on board while this budget season's going forward, that we try to lease this thing with everybody on board for the next 5 months. And try to lease both of them, the 2-story and the 1-story. Everyone get behind it. Yes, Brett, there was a lot of problems in the middle school. That's the one we really knew of. And the big problem with that, with the PCBs that were in there, was the fact that we had kids in there. We may have other uses that are educational that don't have the same stringent standards because they're not kids in there. So let's not make that the sticking point where we keep pointing that out. That can be overcome perhaps. But stay positive, go forward for the next 5 months, fill this gap, prudently as we should, figure out what we're going to budget for the next year. And the voters are going to tell us, we are not going to give you that line item. And that tells us, listen, we got to start looking at, and by then we're going to know we haven't gotten, it's been 5 months. COVID we're kind of coming out of it a little bit, hopefully, knock on wood. Vaccines are going in, the market's going to be better. People are going to be feeling better about maintaining office space because not when everyone's working from home anymore. There's a lot of positive things that can happen in the next 5 months that weren't there for the last 5 months. And we're gonna have a lot of feedback from the town between now and then as to what they want from this building. And we're going to be able to, show them, hey, we got some really good interest, or, hopefully we have something by then. I don't agree with 8 months, Mike. I think we're going to have to figure out what we're doing with this within the next budget season. In this budget season, find out what we're going to do with it next year. From
I have no doubt
the next fiscal year.
I have no doubt if we're united about it that we could have results in 5 months if results are there to be had. If we're not working against each other on it, I feel like it's totally possible. And that's a reasonable expectation for me too. I mean, I don't have a horse in the game here. I mean, I just want to see success for the town, whatever that looks like. So, that makes sense to me.
I think, to bring closure there, we have the resolution on the table that was approved by the townspeople. I would absolutely have to say, and Brett, you would have to agree with this, I think, that there's been a lot of interest, new interest in what's going on in North Stonington, and people who want to be a part of it and are making investments in that line. So, I would be hopeful, Mike, to your point, that in 5 months, we'll have a pretty good picture. We still would have to budget next fiscal year for the expenses of that building, hopefully to be offset by expected revenue. So, I mean, that
let me jump in there. I mean, I think, to be fair to the townspeople, given what we had for the last year, if we do not have, a contract in place, we are going to have to budget in the expenses that we know of now. It's not going to be the what we budgeted last year, that it obviously was a shortfall. We budget accurate numbers on the expense side and zero on the revenue side. And that's the budget that we're going to have to put forward if we do not have this thing rented by the end of the fiscal year.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Sarah, I think you were next.
Yeah, I want to echo, I agree with Mike in terms of, we got a budget for the expenses. The expenses are the expenses regardless. Like the 800,000 to $1 million or whatever to demo doesn't eliminate the expenses. So we have to solve that. I think as a board, we have to make sure we're aligned on that. And then I think, just to build on what Mike said, I do agree with like the 5.5 month timeframe, because we have to address the budget. But I would like to understand from the realtor, if the Board of Selectmen would be willing to go and ask, what's a reasonable amount of time that it typically takes to do a lease of a building of that capacity, and maybe do more of a checkpoint. So like, could we have a checkpoint in 3 months, or could we have a checkpoint? Like, because if we're seeing interest, but it's not totally leased yet, that doesn't mean it will never get leased. I just don't know what the normal expectation is. So I think the expenses are what they are. We're going to have them whether or not we demo the building. So we have to address that. I agree with Mike's proposal. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think we have to budget. And even if we have revenue, like even if we have a lease in place, I'd still like to see a placeholder. Having been a landlord myself, sometimes things happen and the lease money doesn't come in, right? So I'd like to see something there, not nothing, not assuming that, it's all going to be covered. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been saying. We need to know how it's going to impact the current budget, and it has to be budgeted for the next fiscal year. And then we see what happens. And budgets are put forward as kind of a blueprint and meant to be fluid. And if it brings us to new decisions, that's what we'll have to do. Carolyn?
Nita has her hand up. I just want to let you guys know Nita has her hand up. You just can't see her because the camera's not on her. So I'm not saying to go to her next. I'm just saying she had her hand up and nobody can see.
I just had a really quick question though. For that 5 months, are we presenting it as this and this, or are we presenting it as the two pieces together? How are we presenting this?
I think that has to be worked out, and the Board of Selectmen has to take the lead on that, Nita, and they have to work as a united front. And there's no reason why economic development shouldn't step in here and maybe help out a little bit too.
Okay, thank you.
Caroline?
So I don't think that if we're going to let this go on, like I agree with Mike Anderson, it has to be taken care of within this budget cycle. And I don't believe it should go past April 1st. If you don't have a solid agreement in place by April 1st, then I think that we should make a decision about going forward, to the town to seek demolition or whatever they decide they want to do with it. And also I want to know how we're going to prevent more inappropriate spending, because this has been a problem. And that's our job.
We still have the expenses though. Even if we do the demo, we still have the expenses. So don't we still need to solve for the expenses?
I understand there's expenses like the lights or heat. Again, I understand that part of it, but when we had discussions before, there were costs that would have been related to shutting that part of the building down. I mean, before our last budget cycle, we talked about the building, and when they had only $40,000 in there as a line item to maintain the empty building, until it could be taken care of, because the project wasn't closed out at that point. And that's when we found out that the money wasn't there to do the demo, even though the taxpayers have been told over and over and over how awful the building was. It was in disrepair. We have, like Brett said, videos and recordings of this being said by our first selectmen and others over and over again. So, I mean, the building is a sick building. It needs a lot of work. It's not going away. They just put solar on top of the roof. So now they're saying they need to have a new roof. So what's involved with taking the solar panels off to do, I mean, there's just a lot.
The solar's not on the old roof section, Carolyn, it's on the new roof. And last year when we went and talked about the 40,000, we very well did know that there wasn't money for the demo, and we still took it out of the budget. And to Sarah's point, we are going to have these expenses regardless of whether or not, I think there's just too much focus on the middle school that these expenses exist regardless of the middle school. The expenses exist. We have 2/3 of the building still occupied or unoccupied by, some parts of it that need to be paid for. So I guess what I'd like to get to as we are, 2 hours into the meeting is, are we okay with just continuing to pay these bare minimum expenses, knowing that we're not having anything more than the bare minimums that need to be done going forward on anything done. We're talking about utilities. If a major instance of something major comes up that needs to be repaired because of something unforeseen, obviously we'll go right to the Board of Selectmen to talk about it. This is a high priority. I brought it to the board as soon as I saw that it was, escalating to the point where we needed to talk about it, and we would do that again. So I just looked for for us to make a decision on, as I kind of felt, it just makes sense to wait until maybe April or so to go to the people for the additional appropriation.
So are you still monitoring the air quality? Are you still paying for that? So that's not being paid for in any of the buildings at this point?
Nope.
I think, again, what was presented as we have to take as accurate, the information that was provided. The administration of that building is in the hands of general government.
Well, we asked for
yes,
backup.
we want to know what the cost is going to be, and that's what they have to bring forward. They've tried to attempt that.
I asked for the backup. Did you get my email requesting the backup information for these invoices that were paid?
Why would you need that?
I wanted to look at it. I'm looking at the general fund transaction detail by account, and that's where I got the information from. And we're supposed to have open government where we can see the invoices that have been paid. So that's why I'm asking. I was voted in to the Board of Finance to ask questions. So I'm asking questions on behalf of the taxpayer in good faith that our town is spending the money appropriately.
Yeah, I mean, we have to, I have to ask staff, so I wasn't aware of that, Carolyn, but I have to put my staff on pulling together a bunch of invoices for you, which we can do when we have time to do it. I mean, we have a lot going on right now. So just putting this data together for everyone was time consuming, which we're happy to do. It's important, but you know, if we want to get piles of invoices, we have to go back into each week. We have to pull them. We have to make copies of them. It's a process.
So you don't scan in your invoices? You don't have a computer record of them?
At the last Board of Finance meeting, when I asked what you guys needed from me, I asked if you wanted copies of the invoices or if you just wanted this report, and I was told by you as a board that this report was all you needed. You didn't need to see the actual electric bills and the usage. So I don't know where the confusion happened, because
I have been asking for this information month over month over month. I'm sorry, I'm just tired of asking for information and questions as to why I'm asking. I'm sorry. I think that you should have this posted on OpenGov so that anyone could look at it should they choose, and then you would not have to waste time having staff copy and things like that. I think that in this day and age, we have plenty of technology where you can scan and you can print on demand. I mean, we have to do it in healthcare. I'm sure everyone else is doing it in their professions.
Brett?
So a few questions. The realty contract, Mike, that you did sign already, how long is that for? Because that's
10 years. Just kidding.
That's funny.
It's just for a year.
It's a year contract?
A year was the minimum. A year was the minimum. It's a lot of work for them to try to market this property. They actually asked for like a 5-year contract, and I said there's just no way that's happening. So
market it for a lease or management?
No, we haven't signed a management contract yet. I have one, but I haven't signed it yet.
All right, so we have to pay whether in 5 months we decide to do something else, we're gonna have to pay them out.
No, there's no charge if they don't rent any of the space. That's the contract I signed. What does it sound good? Because it is good. That's why I signed it.
The guy is in your BNI group, so he should be good. So I do have to, Carolyn did ask for a lot of information, and I would request that we get those other expenditures in writing of where the highway foreman put the Caswell bill and those things. And Sarah, I understand your point of, you know, whether we knock it down or not, we're going to have bills, and we are. They will be less, but this doesn't, I mean, we need to stop the bleeding a little bit, because it won't be all this, because this isn't the bare minimum. And I know I harp on the signage, but those are the little things that we spend $1,500 on here or there. We rename a building without all the selectmen talking about it. We do have to look at, you know, going forward, is that where voting is staying? Because you still have to put that to a town vote. You were only allowed to move that there temporarily. So now if we're talking about selling or leasing, these are all things that have to be part of this plan that we should be aware of, so you can budget accordingly. So if that's the permanent polling location, then it is, and we have to account for that part of our bill for the municipality. But that does have to go to a town meeting and a town vote to move that there permanently. So is there a way to get the answers to Carolyn's questions about details and get information from the highway foreman of the Caswell bill and all that? How much did we really spend? So we have those hard numbers. And I have to say, one reason that I asked Dan to ask someone from the Board of Ed to be part of this meeting, and he was going to talk to you and the Board of Ed, and I think they actually sent a representative to be here, is so when we ask a question about, or Carolyn or Ann asked about, I don't know if it was the boiler or the gas, and we say, well, we don't know, that Board of Ed has to answer that question. It'd be nice if we were all on the same page and working together to move this forward with that information, so we don't have to rely on another meeting or whatever. I just think that we are spinning our wheels a little bit because of, we don't know where we're going, but we have to handle this. And I do worry that we set a bad precedence by saying, hey, take this money, or you guys, the Board of Selectmen, took that money out of the budget to be able to cut your budget and not show an increase and spend it somewhere else. yet you spent it anyways. And now we have to deal with it. So, I mean, if there was any other department doing this, if EDC, well, I can't spend that kind of money, but because I don't write checks, but if anybody else just spent money and then said, well, I didn't budget for it, now please, we have to recoup it, it would be crazy. And the Board of Finance, we would be looking at each other like, how did this happen? I just think we're setting a bad precedent by, we took that out of the budget, we still spent the money without discussion, and we're going to continue for the next 5 months. So
I think what's ludicrous is that anyone on this call would think that there wasn't going to be expenses related to that building, which we have our Board of Education in, central office in. It's the town's responsibility. We knew it. We all together voted on a budget that didn't put money aside for it. And so we have to own that responsibility now. We've done our best to try to pay for things that are, only the necessary things. And that's what we'll continue to do. I'm more than happy to get, task the staff with putting invoices together. If that's something that you guys want to see every single invoice, it'll take a little bit of time, but certainly we're happy to do that. And why don't we just, I guess that would be the next action step that you'd be looking for. I mean, I don't know that what I would say from the Board of Selectmen's perspective, from my perspective, in November, I made my board aware of it. Christine has been making your board aware of it at every meeting she goes to, that we knew that there was going to be an overrun on the line. We've had a joint meeting now where you're aware of it. So, I mean, I don't think there's any further meetings necessary between us to figure it out. We have a situation, so it's just a matter of how do we want to handle it going forward. So I've given my perspective on it, and if there's a different idea, I certainly welcome it.
Well, Dan, can you shed some light on just the process of how we should move forward, or how this should have happened to begin with, and what are the consequences, or how do we recoup that money to make up for it, other than the town meeting? You're the chair of the Board of Finance. How does this play out?
I think a lot of things that I've had to say, Brett, I don't think you've listened to at all. And that I did speak to the chair of Board of Ed. You can call Christine Wagner, and invited her to this meeting to listen in and to offer any perspective that we might not have an answer for that she would. And she told me that she was not able to make the meeting herself, but she would send a representative. So, relative to Christine.
I'm sorry, Dan, and she did, and I haven't called. I don't want to call. It's not a joint Board of Ed meeting. It isn't the Board of Ed's problem. I don't want to involve them in it because it's not their problem. It's just not. So,
but it was just to get some answers so we can.
All right. So if I can continue, I think that I have to put trust in general government as to what they're doing relative to the budget. I think audits have proven that out year in and year out. Yes, we all were aware that nothing was budgeted for the old school, other than what Board of Ed was taken. Do we have to get down to the invoice levels? I would say then that, we're not considering that general government's doing their job. If they're presenting figures to us, I would take them to be accurate and be, doesn't mean that we're not oversight and should take a look, but it's not for me to look at every single invoice. So if somebody wants to take time to do that, fine.
But Dan, they just said all the numbers aren't there. We don't know all the expenses. That's all.
I don't remember that. I don't remember them saying that, Brett. I think Christine and Mike both said that.
Brett, you pointed out one item that I guess was omitted, and that was the work on the brickwork. I mean, we can go back and double check to make sure there's nothing else missing like that. If that was missing, it was certainly not purposeful. Again, we're a small staff. We're doing our best. I think the records we have are pretty good. We put some good estimates together for you guys. The highway foreman does an excellent job of tracking the time. So he may have just allocated that expense in a different way. We'll go back and look for that. There's nothing else of any sort of major expense that's not included in here. So you do have, minus something like that, or maybe some ancillary thing, you have the information.
Yeah, in terms of transfers and appropriations, they come to the Board of Finance for us to have the backup and make a decision as to put it forward. If it should exceed $20,000, it goes to a town meeting, and then the town meeting has to decide, okay, are we going to approve it or not?
What
I
happens
think,
if they
that if I can finish, I think relative to leasing it, the building, we have a responsibility to the resolution that we put forward that the townspeople voted on. So if it's 5 months, which seems reasonable, Mike Anderson put that forward. But anything short of that, I mean, anyone who's tried to sell a piece of property or a house or whatever, you know, it takes a little time to develop the marketing and bring it to, you know, some reality. So I would take whatever general government bringing to us to be factual. I think that that's been, it's been explored by auditors. Everything has been as it should. And, you know, I think that, you know, for us to continually throw distrust towards general government, I'm not getting it. I'm really not getting it. I also would have to say that I would anticipate that all of the selectmen, women, work together and have a common front as to what they're presenting to the Board of Finance.
Knowledge is good.
Anne, please. Anne?
Oh, okay. Sorry, that was interesting. It's not that I don't trust the numbers they're giving me. I do trust them. I just think there are some that are missing.
Well, I think the only one that has been talked about has been the brickwork that I am hearing.
Well, there's the paint that was used to paint the hallways, the asphalt that was used for putting down the walkways.
All of those come out of the highway budget. They're not something that's split out specifically to a project. So if it was being done at the rec center or the Center for Emergency Services, the highway would absorb that cost. So this is no different than anything else that we do.
I understand that, but if we're trying to break out the costs that are specific to this building, those are part of the cost specific to this building.
And that stuff is like usually like a bulk buy. You buy 30 yards of it, and that's what you use a bunch of different parts. You know, unless you invoice, you use 3 yards here, 2 yards here, 5 yards here. That's all bulk buy. That's going to be very difficult to strip out.
Mike Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, going back to the tri-boards and what we've done in the last several years about working together, you know, I just got to try to promote that as much as possible. We have a lot of, we have our fellow, friends and neighbors working on these boards, working really hard, and most of us working for nothing other than Christine, who does a fantastic job and will give us all the information we need. Let's just keep it civil, keep it positive, and keep it moving forward. So that's it for my high horse there. I did get a message from Dave McCord, who's on the Board of Education. He was supposed to be on this in this meeting for the Board of Education. He didn't think he had a ton to add for that, but he was somehow he just couldn't get into the meeting. So he wanted to make sure that you guys knew that and that they didn't just blow us off.
I think I've from
Board of Ed, I mean.
Thank you, Mike. Put forward our expectations to general government, and that we understand that this is a town asset that we have to meet expenditures on, and hopefully that you are administering what that asset needs in terms of leasing or sale or whatever it's going to be, and that it's done in a way that is to the benefit of the town.
So my action, what I'm hearing tonight, and I appreciate all the feedback and the good discussion and all your volunteerism and attention to detail on all of this. I appreciate the teamwork on it. I really do. And my action, it will be I'll be working closer with the realtor now, especially that we have no tenancy there, to promote the entire building. I will also get some numbers on what the building is valued at if we were to potentially sell it. We will work incredibly hard to market that building. I will put a sign up. We will not just put a sign up, but we will be working with different education facilities, putting a marketing plan together to really get the word out about the building. And we'll just go at it really strong. And at the end of the day, if we don't have any action on it, then at least we can say we tried our hardest. And that's what I take my action to be. And you have my word that that's what I'll do beginning tomorrow.
Okay, do understand that, we still are going to be looking at what the impact is to the current budget, and that we'll need the budget figure to be processed during the budget cycle for 21-22. All right, Ann?
Do we have an estimate on how much we saved on Boombridge, and does it come close to covering this?
Absolutely not. And I think I overstated the amount we saved on Boombridge last night. So the cost came to, I think it was supposed to be 1.9, but I think there was some contingency in there and maybe some other costs that I didn't have. So we definitely saved on Boombridge, but it's certainly nowhere near this amount, although it's substantial. Christine will have, hopefully we can get that by the time you have your next meeting. We'll get a more accurate figure.
Okay.
All right.
All right, the hour is getting late, folks. Consideration to Board of Selectmen and for Board of Finance members. We do have a Board of Finance meeting a week from tonight, and the main presentation will be from our assessor, Daryl Del Grosso, relative to the reval and the consequence to the grand list, which is a very key part of what we'll be doing in the budget cycle.
Well, I think, go ahead, Nita.
And Mike, it's next week is also the tri-board meeting, correct?
On the 24th?
Yes, thank you, Nita. Yes, the tri-board meeting is next week. I did send an email to the chairs. You are all invited and encouraged to attend. That will be with our state representatives, Senator Heather Summers, as well as Representative Greg Howard, the 21st at 7 p.m., 7 to 8:30 p.m. And that will be a public meeting, obviously, with public interaction, comment available for everybody. And each of the chairs will give a short update. And then, of course, you'll have the opportunities to speak with the representatives as well. So that's next Thursday. Next Thursday.
Dan, did you have a closing statement that you wanted to make or comment?
Yeah, I had to. I'm going to totally agree with Mike Anderson on this one, where we need to come together as both boards to work through this. Me personally, I think 5 months might be a little bit too long, but I think what we need to do is work things in parallel. I just don't want us to get 6 months down the road and then we have to go out and we're thinking about selling it, and then it takes 8 months to try to sell it. I think we need to start getting some firmer numbers, because when did we send out the RFP and when did we get actual numbers for the demo?
That wasn't that long ago. Those are pretty accurate, and they're not bad. I know they're accurate because the number we got on the demo wasn't far off of the number we got on the demo when we actually bid it out initially. So that number hasn't moved all that much. Of course, circumstances have changed with the pandemic, so it may be a little different. So I think the only thing we're missing, Dan, you've said this now twice, and I agree with you, is that we don't have a number on the building sale. I will get that number and we'll have everything in tandem. I agree with you. We want to get all our ducks in a row.
All right, Sarah, I'm going to take you as the last one.
Okay.
I think
one last request.
Keep repeating. So go ahead.
Yeah. No, I won't repeat. Just one last action item request to build on Dan's and parallel sentiment is just, could we get an assessment from the
from the real estate agency, like what a typical range takes to both lease and sale. So like for a building of this capacity, what's the normal expected rate there?
Okay. I will get that information. We'll work hard. And I want to thank you all for your time this evening for this good discussion. And with that, I'll entertain a motion from one of my board to adjourn.
So moved.
And one of mine,
Second.
Paul. Second to Paul on mine.
Yep.
Carolyn.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night, everyone.
Hey, Mike.
9:08.
Yes.
Good night.
Mike,
Good night.
good luck.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.